You don't need to pretend to be strong. True strength is not a mask. It is the quiet stability of a mind that cannot be shaken. Criticism does not unbalance it. Failure does not cause panic. Temptation does not pull it off course. A mind like this speaks for itself. Its presence carries more weight than any words. This kind of strength is not new. For centuries, warriors, leaders, and thinkers have endured chaos and hardship with the same inner discipline. They drew on Stoicism, not as an idea to admire, but as a way to live. A framework for mastering the self, steadying the emotions, seeing clearly, building discipline, and remaining untouchable in the face of manipulation or pain. If the world feels chaotic and you want to become unshakable, Stoicism offers a path, but growth carries a cost. One of the first lessons you will face is loneliness, not because you've done wrong, but because for the first time you are doing what is right for you. You stop moving with the crowd. You no longer pretend excitement at shallow distractions. You begin to question what you once followed without thought. From that moment, you are no longer normal, and that unsettles people. When you quit what harms you, others feel judged. When you stay silent instead of joining gossip, they call you distant. But the truth is simple. You are not pushing anyone away. You are simply no longer willing to live their way. Perhaps you already feel it. The fatigue of pretending, the strain of smiling at what leaves you empty. This is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the refusal to remain a background character in someone else's story. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "To live a good life, we have the potential for it if we can learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference." A good life is not measured by how many people surround you, but by how free you are from what does not matter. And this is what unsettles others most. When you stop chasing noise, you reveal how loud their distractions truly are. From here, the task is to master one of life's rarest skills, walking alone without losing your way. No school teaches this. No one hands you a manual for staying awake while the world dreams. Strength of mind is not forged in applause, but in those moments when no one understands you and you remain steady. Picture this. You stand alone in a quiet room. No voices, no screens, no distractions. Only you and your unfiltered thoughts. Can you sit with that silence? Or do you reach for noise, for escape, for anything to avoid yourself? Because if you cannot be at peace in your own company, you will always remain bound to the crowd. If you always need the crowd to feel whole, you'll never be strong enough to discover who you truly are. Emily Dickinson chose silence, yet her words still echo through centuries. Nikola Tesla spent much of his life in solitude, yet his vision reshaped the modern world. They did not blend in, they stepped away, and in that quiet distance, they found clarity. The question is, are you willing to step into that silence even for a moment? Tonight, turn everything off, close the door, sit quietly, and write. What am I avoiding? What questions am I afraid to ask? Why do I seek so many voices just to feel that I matter? The answers won't arrive at once. But in that stillness, something stronger begins to take root. Loneliness is not a punishment. It is the workshop where reconstruction begins. It is the ground where the mind learns not to break. When you can stand in silence without withering, then judgment, rejection, and failure lose their power. They become background noise. And when you rise from that silence with a mind that does not shake, people will see you differently, not with admiration, but with caution, because you are no longer dependent, no longer easy to sway. A mind like this unsettles others. And here is the next lesson. Change will threaten people. Even small changes, choosing your words more carefully, declining shallow invitations, reading more, complaining less, can disturb those around you. Not because you've done wrong, but because your growth reflects their stagnation. Most people resist that reflection. They disguise it with jokes. "Since when did you get so serious?" Or with silence when you share something meaningful. It isn't that you're wrong. It's that your light makes them confront their own darkness. Real growth does not need to announce itself. It works like light in a dark room. It does not speak. It simply reveals. And if someone has grown comfortable in the dark, that light will feel harsh. This is why groups often cling to sameness, what psychology calls groupthink. It preserves comfort, even if it costs truth. But the Stoic path is not about comfort. It is about clarity, discipline, and freedom. In any group built on complaints, the first person who goes quiet and looks for solutions is often labeled strange, distant, even dangerous. Not because they are wrong, but because they disturb the old order. And all growth by nature is a challenge to what no longer serves us. Consider Socrates. He wasn't executed because he harmed anyone. He stole nothing, committed no violence. His crime was asking questions that forced people to confront their illusions, their unexamined beliefs. That alone was enough to unsettle the powerful. The same pattern appeared with Malcolm X. When his vision expanded beyond narrow lines of loyalty, he was not only opposed by the system, but even rejected by some who once supported him. Growth has a way of making you a stranger to your old tribe. So ask yourself honestly, how many times have you held back your own progress just to keep others comfortable? How often have you shrunk to stay safe in someone else's approval? The hard truth is this: the people you bend yourself to please today may be the first to abandon you tomorrow, but the strength you cultivate within yourself, that endures. That is what carries you through. No one evolves without leaving certain shadows behind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." If your growth unsettles others, resist the urge to over-explain or beg for understanding. Simply keep moving. Real change does not need validation. It proves itself through results and inner steadiness. Here's a small practice. Write down 3 ways you are changing and then 3 negative reactions you've received. Then ask yourself, if I went back to who I was, would I respect myself more? The answer, if you're honest, is usually clear. A strong mind is not the one that avoids resistance, but the one that moves through it without folding. Not everyone is ready for the new. But if you are, stop waiting for permission. Walk forward. Because nothing is more unsettling to the crowd than a free mind. A mind that no longer seeks approval and no longer plays by rules that keep others comfortable. When you stop living for validation, you become harder to predict. And to society, that feels like a threat. Not because you're dangerous, but because your independence quietly asks others to face what they've avoided in themselves. Nietzsche called this kind of person the Übermensch, one who rises above the herd's morality and lives by a value system of their own making. Such a person does not ask, "Am I allowed to do this?" Instead, they ask, "Is this worthy of me?" Just as a climber does not seek directions from those still in the valley, a strong mind does not wait for permission before taking the next step. It has moved beyond what is merely acceptable into what is authentic. Think about it. Have you ever deleted a post because you feared no one would care? Have you ever held back simply because someone disapproved? The question isn't how often you censor yourself, it's whose life you are living. When recognition dictates your choices, you are no longer the one steering. You become a performer dressed as an independent mind. The Stoics remind us, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish or stupid. Growth requires the courage to appear wrong in the eyes of others. That is the price of freedom. The less you depend on approval, the freer you are to do what is right. But society resists this, because if you prove it is possible to stand alone, others must confront the truth that they are not. Mediocrity doesn't need weapons. It survives through consensus, through glances, casual mockery, and practical advice meant to pull you back in line. Not from hatred, but because your self-assurance unsettles their own doubt. Nietzsche called this slave morality. When weakness is recast as virtue, independence becomes selfishness, strength becomes coldness. Yet you were not born to please everyone. Galileo was condemned for saying the earth revolves around the sun. Rosa Parks was criticized for refusing to give up her seat. What they shared was simple: the refusal to bend truth for comfort. Real strength does not always roar. Sometimes it is found in the quiet refusal to flinch when the world pushes back. Here's a small exercise. Eat alone in a familiar place. No phone, no distractions, no pretending to be busy. Simply sit. The unease you feel is not true loneliness. It is the fear of being seen as lonely. Push through it, and you will discover the first taste of freedom, peace with how others perceive you. Ask yourself honestly, if I shared nothing, if I told no one, would my work still feel meaningful? If the answer is no, then perhaps you are performing life instead of living it. Like a farmer who plants for applause instead of fruit, you may have been off track longer than you realize. The wisdom has always been the same. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You don't need to fight against the world. You only need the courage to live differently. And that begins by letting go of the crowd's approval. If you want to build a mind that unsettles others in the best way, start by defining your own values. Don't borrow morals from the majority. Don't wait for permission to move. Let every action answer one quiet question. Does this make me a better version of myself? And when you can stand tall without leaning on praise, you are not only strong, you are free. Number 4, own your life completely. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. Calmness itself is a form of strength. In a world of quick reactions, the one who pauses to think becomes the most formidable person in the room. That begins with a hard truth. No one but you is responsible for your life. The Stoics spoke often of logos, the rational order of the universe. Life unfolds according to its own laws, whether you approve or not. You may lose your job, be betrayed, or misunderstood. That is the world's part. Your part is how you respond. And your response is your declaration of strength. We often mistake faith for surrender, believing that if we live well, life must go well. Maturity begins when you let go of that illusion. When you look in the mirror and ask, if no one helps me, how far can I help myself? That shift from waiting on the world to taking charge within is where true resilience is born. Nietzsche once declared that God is dead. He was not celebrating atheism. He was issuing a warning. Without the old moral scaffolding, humanity must stand on its own. No divine script, no scapegoat, no fate to blame. You are steering the ship, and you alone are accountable if it strikes the rocks. It is a lonely truth, but it is also a profound freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre called it a burden. Man is condemned to be free, because freedom carries weight. Without destiny, without instruction, every decision matters, and no one else can take responsibility for it but you. Yes, freedom is heavy, but it is also power. Once you carry it, you become untouchable. No one can bribe you with rewards, frighten you with loss, or control you with approval. And that unsettles people who rely on the crowd. So where do you begin? By dropping the excuses. I'm this way because of my childhood, because of society, because no one understands me. That is not who you are. Growth begins when you release the script others handed you and take full ownership of the one you are writing now. You chose to be who you are today, and you can choose differently if you're willing to set aside the list of excuses that keep you from facing yourself. Try something simple that most people never attempt. Before bed, don't ask, "Who drained me today?" Ask instead, "What responsibility did I avoid today?" Write it down, not to punish yourself, but to give tomorrow a chance to look different. A small, steady choice can alter the direction of an entire life. Strength of mind is not about knowing everything. It is about taking responsibility, even when the path is unclear. Pause for a moment. Breathe. Look around. Notice this. You just proved you can direct your own actions. Even in the smallest way, you showed control. That is the beginning of strength. And if you continue on this path, remember, every step is building one thing, a mind the world cannot ignore. Number 5, strength is facing pain. A resilient mind is not built on comfort or easy affirmations. It does not come from pretending that pain is not there. It comes from meeting it directly. Sometimes the cracks in your soul are not signs of weakness, but openings, places where light can enter, pointing toward growth. Ask yourself, how many times have you run from pain rather than endure it? And where did that escape lead? A mind of steel is not formed in calm waters. It is forged in chaos, in confusion, in long nights when you wonder if you can keep going. That inner turmoil you feel is not your enemy. It is raw material. It is clay. And it is waiting to be shaped into something stronger. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote that humans can endure almost anything so long as they find meaning in their suffering. The question then is not whether you suffer, but whether you've sought meaning in it or only tried to outrun it. There's a story that carries this truth. James was a respected engineer, a husband, a father. His world collapsed when his 6-year-old son died in an accident. For months, James moved like a shadow. He buried himself in work, pushed down every feeling, tried to stay numb. But the more he ran, the more hollow he became. Then one day, he saw his son's shoes under the table, and something broke. For the first time, he let himself grieve. He began writing letters to his son, one each day. Letters about the guilt, the ache, the moments they would never share. A year later, those letters became a book that helped countless parents navigate their own losses. Maybe your story is not like James's, but everyone carries some pain they keep buried. And the truth is this: pain itself does not destroy us. What destroys us is the refusal to face it. What matters is not escaping pain, but learning to sit with it. Each morning, ask yourself, what pain am I trying to avoid? Write it down. Not as a complaint, but as an act of understanding. Then ask, what can this teach me? When you face pain directly, it loses its grip. It becomes fuel. Just as coal under pressure becomes diamond, the mind under trial becomes sharper, steadier, stronger. Seneca reminded us, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Without hardship, there can be no resilience. So the real question is this: do you choose comfort in illusions or growth through truth? Pause here. Breathe. Reflect. How many times have you stepped back, not because you lacked ability, but because you feared the pain of trying? How many opportunities have you let pass because you didn't want to feel too deeply? Here's a simple practice. Choose one painful memory. Then rewrite it, not from the perspective of someone trapped inside it, but from the perspective of someone who has already walked through it. Tell the story as if you have reached the other side, because when the story changes, your mind changes too. A strong mind is not a gift at birth. It is built, and the raw materials are never easy. Loss, failure, struggle. While others shrink, you step forward. While others complain, you learn. While others break, you grow. That is when people begin to notice your strength. Not because you never hurt, but because you do not collapse. Once pain becomes your teacher, it becomes your weapon. Number 6, expect the worst. Strength is not built on denial. It is built on preparation. The strongest minds anticipate difficulty, not because they are pessimists, but because they would rather face reality than be surprised by it. That is what makes them unshakable. You cannot break someone who has already made peace with failure. Think of the calmest person in a storm. They do not panic. They do not shout. They watch, steady, as if they knew the storm would come. People often mistake this for coldness. It isn't coldness. It is Stoicism at its highest level. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The wise man sees in the misfortune of others what he should avoid. The wise do not wait for disaster to learn. They observe, reflect, and prepare. They ask the hard questions most avoid. What if I lose someone I love? What if my work disappears overnight? What if I am betrayed by the person I trust most?" They don't ask to torment themselves. They ask to strengthen themselves. Because preparation is freedom. As investor Howard Marks once put it, risk is what's left when you think you've thought of everything. He never steps into a decision without first walking through the worst-case scenario, not out of fear, but from wisdom. Because it's not failure that destroys, it's surprise. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly imagined the worst? And when was the last time you broke down simply because you hadn't? Here's a practice. At the end of each week, choose one area of your life, your work, your relationships, your health, your finances. Write down the hardest thing that could realistically happen there. Be honest, no filters, then write how you would respond. What steps could you take? Who could you lean on? Where would your strength come from? When you do this, something shifts. You feel your own pulse. You notice your breath. And if you can still sit calmly, you are already becoming harder to shake. People don't respect untested optimism. What unsettles them is quiet resilience. They fear the one who can look at loss and not collapse. Because your calm reveals the fragility they avoid in themselves. Think of Mike Tyson before a fight. No show, no noise, no false bravado, just stillness. His battles had already been fought in his mind long before he entered the ring. That stillness wasn't coldness. It was survival, forged in hardship and loss. Preparing for the worst does not make you numb. It makes you free. Most avoid pain by pretending it isn't there. You welcome it, sit with it, and ask, what truth do you carry? Now ask yourself, if everything outside of you was taken away, your wealth, your status, your relationships, what would remain untouched within you? That answer is the measure of your strength. A strong mind doesn't need to roar. It needs only to remain still when the world shakes. And sometimes that calm is enough to command a room. Once you are at peace with the worst, the next lesson becomes clear. Not everything requires a reaction. Silence, restraint, and composure, these are deeper forms of power. Because most of our reactions are just attempts to control what was never ours. The words of others, their opinions, their choices. But the Stoics remind us, those things were never within our grasp. What is within reach is always the same, how we choose to respond. Calmly, clearly, with strength. The rest belongs to life, to others, to the world, and none of it is worth your peace. Epictetus once said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. When you lose your temper, you've handed over your mind. And the unsettling truth is, it doesn't take much. A glance, a careless word, and suddenly, you're no longer steering yourself. Non-reaction is not weakness. It is the discipline of choosing where your energy goes. You don't need the last word. You don't need to win every quarrel. The real victory is walking away without losing yourself. Consider this story. Andrew is a teacher. He isn't wealthy or powerful, but he carries a presence that draws respect. One day, furious parents stormed into the school demanding his removal. They shouted, accusing him of injustice, loud enough for entire classrooms to hear. Andrew didn't defend himself. He didn't explain or argue. He listened. When they finally grew quiet, not because they had softened, but because they had emptied themselves, he said simply, I understand you're worried about your child. I'll file a report with the principal as protocol requires. That was all. No defense, no attack. And yet his stillness carried more weight than their shouting. Leadership stood by him not because he fought, but because his composure told the truth more clearly than words ever could. This is what non-reaction looks like. Not passivity, but steadiness. Like a structure that does not sway in the smallest tremor, you trust it because it stands firm. If you wonder where to begin, start small. The rude driver, the thoughtless comment, the pointless online debate. Resist the impulse to answer. Let silence be the mirror. People will hear their own noise more loudly when it isn't echoed back to them. Nietzsche once warned, he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. The danger of reacting is that you start to mirror what you oppose. You give away your strings, thinking you're the one pulling them. That's the trap. Reactivity often feels righteous, like defending justice or truth. But more often, it's just being led from one feeling to the next. Strength isn't in defeating every challenger. It's in no longer needing to. A strong mind does not argue for its worth. It simply lives it. And when you stop reacting, you stop playing by rules that aren't yours. You begin to move by your own standards. Calm, clear, untouchable. That's when no one can move you with their words, their stares, or even their silence. A steady mind unsettles people, not because it threatens, but because it cannot be shaken. True strength isn't loud. It's the quiet refusal to be pulled away from yourself. This is why silence carries power. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of stability. The kind that makes others reflect on their own noise. And here is the next truth. Critical thinking is the sharpest form of strength. No authority, no system, no crowd can take it from you. It's the shield of an independent spirit against the mediocrity of modern life, against lazy thinking, shallow opinions, and emotional reflexes. But this strength is not a gift. No one is born with it. It is forged through daily discipline. It's the practice of asking, why do I believe this? Who shaped my thoughts? Are my words my own or just echoes of the crowd? This is not a single battle, but a constant one. The habitual self against the awake self. And victory is not found in agreement from others. It is found in the quiet clarity that comes each time you refuse to accept an unexamined idea. You cannot control the world, but you can control the way you meet it. And that begins with the courage to think differently. When someone says, everyone does it, you ask, who is everyone? And why must I be like them? When the headlines arrive, you pause. What isn't being said here? Not to oppose for the sake of opposing, but to leave space for truth before emotion and noise fill the mind. The irony of our time is that we live in an age of information, yet few of us have been taught how to think. We consume ideas like fast food, quick, easy, and undigested. Then we wonder why we feel restless and lost. But a strong mind is not measured by how many facts it carries. It is measured by its willingness to question. When words wound you, ask, why does this touch me? What fear is hidden beneath it? When anger rises, pause. Am I defending truth or just ego? The moment you choose to question instead of react, you begin to reclaim yourself. This practice doesn't need to be complex. Each day, take one belief about yourself, about others, about the world, and place it under the light. Ask when you last changed your mind. If you cannot recall, ask whether you've truly been thinking or merely repeating an old script. And in conversation, don't wait for your turn to argue. Listen fully to understand what shapes another's view. It is difficult because it requires setting aside ego and standing with truth, even when truth does not flatter you. A strong mind does not chase victory in every debate. It knows not every battlefield is worth entering. Like a skilled soldier, it chooses carefully where to stand. That is critical thinking. That is the discipline of freedom. Strength is not in knowing everything. It is in knowing what is not worth believing, what is not worth reacting to, and what is not worth holding on to. Ask yourself, of all the beliefs you carry, how many are truly yours, and how many were programmed into you? Circumstances cannot always be controlled, but interpretation can. Critical thinking does not make you stubborn. It makes you unmanipulable. You are not easily convinced, and you are not easily triggered. You are the kind of person others cannot sway, and that unsettles them. Strength does not need to shout. Thoughtful reflection alone can command attention. Start today. The next time you ask yourself, have I really thought this through? You are exercising quiet power. We've explored 8 principles for building a mind so strong that the world can't help but take notice. No need to raise your voice. No need to prove anything. Sometimes quiet strength speaks louder than words, leaving others to reflect silently. The power grows from unseen effort, from living for what is right rather than for approval, from realizing no one is coming to save you and embracing that as freedom, from sitting alone, honestly confronting yourself and learning to stay present with your own mind. A formidable mind does not dominate. It cannot be controlled. It chooses what to think, when to remain silent, and how to act with intention. In a world of constant reaction, the rare few who pause to think are the ones who stand out. That rarity is power. If this resonated, hit like, leave a comment. I'd love to know which part made you pause. share it with someone who might need it. And if you are ready to continue building an unshakable mind, hit subscribe. There is much more ahead. Thank you, and see you next time.